VT.
Oh, right,
That's
yes.
a question for producer Joe, isn't it?
My TV just turned on its own. How does
Oh,
that
you know
happen?
what? Funny enough, my
Creepy.
printer just did something. My printer's just kicked in, like for no apparent reason.
Alexa,
Right,
wake me up at 2 a.m.
Why didn't I think of that? Anyway, we started.
We have.
So, we have, and I'm just trying to get the Johnny, you say hello to everybody,
Okay,
and then
okay.
And the video will come momentarily.
Okay, no worries. Thanks, Paul. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the EV Cafe monthly webinar. I'm Johnny Berry, the moderator for today's session, and in my day job, I work for Navuna Vehicle Solutions. And today we're diving into the intersection of ESG and the zero emission mandate with a panel of top tier experts, including Matthew Adams from the REA, James Vickery from the Department of Transport, and our very own Sarah Sloman from Paythrough. Paul, are you ready yet to roll VT? Yeah?
Yes.
Brilliant.
Right.
Professional to the core, we are.
Professional.
Indeed.
I've just realised that LinkedIn, they're probably going to watch this video twice now, aren't they? Because it will just have finished on LinkedIn and then play again. But
I can't seem to optimize for video. Is that not
Well,
doing?
perhaps we'll play a video a bit later on, shall we, Paul?
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah.
Shall we just freestyle an On Tour in 24 video right now?
Yeah.
Yes.
We're going on tour in 24.
Yes,
I'll do the intro.
we're coming to some of the greatest shows in the land to bring you everything that's fabulous about electric vehicles.
Bringing our full selves along with our partners and exhibitors to showcase a full ecosystem of e-mobility.
Did you just read that? That was very good.
Sam, you're next. Come on.
I got nothing. You've done it all. Standard. I'll turn up when I can and say hello.
So, where else would you want to be to put out your messages to help make your customers make informed decisions?
Anywhere else.
Get in touch. Thanks for your support, Sam.
Right, let's just do this.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is it working?
No,
Yes.
no sound.
The EV Cafe on tour in 24. I need more helium.
It was worth a try.
Give it up, Paul.
Yeah, I'd say absolutely give that up. Why don't we do our official welcome and introductions instead, Johnny? How about that?
Yeah, sounds good. Sounds good. So let's start by introducing the team, especially for those that are joining us for the first time. So we have John Curtis, Operations Director at the EV Cafe, and he has a finger on the pulse of the EV market and shares his wisdom on the weekly news, and also manages the mailroom of these webinars, man of many talents. Sorry, John, I've just introed yourself for you.
Rather nice.
Can I just say that my finger on the pulse is not the offence that some people might think it is? Yes, I'm the man who looks after the mailroom. Don't even ask Sam. I look after the mailroom, which essentially means you can ask lots of questions. So in the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen, if you're on Zoom, or in the comments on LinkedIn, ask a question of our guests, and I'll pose that question later on. And the best question will win an EV Cafe mug, not dissimilar to this little bad boy. Oh, yes, but it just won't have coffee in. There we go. Thank you kindly. Goodbye.
Exciting. And as I said earlier, Sarah Sloman from Paythrough, a wizard in the realm of charging payment solutions and all that jazz. You want to say hello, Sarah?
I do. And also just to point out, these are the OG mugs. Those are the original mugs. We're not going to be able to give those ones away, but they are rather lovely. We haven't done this for a while, so please do get those questions in. I monitor the chat box down the side as opposed to the mailroom. So I keep your discussions coming in. One thing I would say, a bit of housekeeping, when you are writing to everyone, please do the little drop down box that says everyone, and those on LinkedIn, I'll try and flick through to your conversations as well as we go. But I'll be covering off a 5-minute section on ESG and what that could mean for your profitable business.
Next is Paul Kirby, not very good with technology, but an authority of
That's so unfair.
vehicles.
Is it?
Not unfair at all.
Is it? Yeah.
He's being kind, in fact.
known for his expertise and most importantly for keeping Sam Clark on his toes.
Oh, I get to keep Sam on his toes, huh? Well, like, I don't think so.
Write that down.
I keep him pulling faces, that's for sure. Because whenever I open my mouth, he starts pulling faces. But no, my world is Vans, and this year we've got an exciting year ahead with being a part of the plan for Vans. All will be revealed in the very near future, and of course we've got the EV Cafe Village, which is the On Tour in 24. But the thing I really love is the podcast, and I do love getting to talk. There's a new one out today, a guy called Martin Dorey, surfer and sustainability man extraordinaire, making sustainability cool. Actually, need to check out that podcast and the 2-minute beach clean. It's phenomenal stuff that he's championed, and we get to talk to some amazing people. We had Russ Peterson the other day, and it's great. So time is exciting, even with Vans as well.
And last but by no means least, Mr. Sam Clark from GridServe, a pivotal figure in the public EV charging infrastructure. And if you don't know him, then you might have to go and Google him. It's a bit of an inside joke.
Don't Google me. My name is so boring. You'll just get another 50 different people who are also called Sam Clark. Thank you, Johnny. That's very kind. That's a nice introduction. You've even prepared it. But yeah, day job, Chief Vehicle Officer at GridServe. I'm all EVs, really, from every conceivable size, vans, bikes, cars, everything. But most of my focus at the moment is on the big stuff, EHGVs, 40 to 44-ton trucks. So that's my focus at the minute. But yeah, as always, lovely to be here. And looking forward to learning something, because I know a little bit about things like ZEV mandate, but not a lot. So I got a feeling that I might learn something today.
Thank you all. And remember, if you want to dive deeper on these sessions, then please do join us where the real magic happens. It's your chance to engage directly with us, ask us any questions, and for your chance to win a mug. But before we dive in, I want to take a moment for us to acknowledge our generous supporters who make the EV Cafe possible. So a heartfelt thank you to our gold partners, and they are PayThrough, Zaptec, the AA, and Plug Me In. Your continued support enables us to host silly little events like this, and more bigger, more professional events as well, and podcasts, and much, much more. So let's jump straight into it. We don't have a lot of time. We're a little bit behind already. What is ESG? John, I see you've got your hand up already.
Yeah, we were going to have a quick chat about stuff, life. I don't know if that's kind of still on the agenda, or have we moved on?
I'll skip part through that, John, based on time, but I'm more than happy to use this time now on it. Yeah, that'd be great.
It was purely, I got really, really excited this morning because I spent some time on a call with Paul, and we were talking to an event producer about putting together one of the EV Cafe On Tour in 24 EV Cafe Village events. And it was absolutely flipping brilliant, wasn't it, Paul?
It was, yeah. I mean, I'm super excited to see what On Tour in 24 is actually going to bring to the party. So many cool things, so many great opportunities. But also it was particularly because it's a slightly beyond the church kind of event as well, isn't it?
What do you mean by that?
Well, we rattle on inside of our echo chamber, don't we? And sort of hear our own voices coming back to us so many times. But what we want to do is kind of speak beyond that church wall and speak to people that aren't necessarily looking for an electric vehicle or an electric solution, or don't have this transition on their mind. So what we want to do is engage with people that are just sort of walking on by and help them grasp this process of electrification as we move towards deadlines that will end the sale of petrol and diesel vehicles. So it's that's where we want to be, helping the masses go electric.
But it's fair to say that we've kind of upped the game a bit, haven't we, this year? And we're not just planning to do the same old, same old. Can we give people a little bit of a heads up as to what that might be?
You certainly can, I guess. So the shows that we're targeting, and we're not committed to any yet, Well, one yet, but anyway. So we're looking at the Everything Electric show. So partnering with the artist formerly known as Fully Charged and going across those guys. Then we've got the commercial vehicle show, slightly outside of the church. Brilliant. We've got Sustainable Road Transport partnering with Sustainable Skies for their event down in Farnborough. And later on in the year, we've got Fleet Mobility Live. We've got the London EV show. And there's other possibilities through the year. And we have got one that's quite exciting, which I won't mention yet. But it could be like a festival style event, which we've got some work to do on yet. But we could all be partying all the weekend and telling people around the wonderful world of electrification. So there's lots of great stuff.
Exciting stuff, Paul. Exciting stuff. We've got a very tight agenda today and a lot to get through. So without further ado, I'd like to dive into today's session. And we start by playing a video from one of our amazing gold partners, Paythrough. Thankfully, this is a job for John Curtis and not Paul Kirby. So.
Do you know what, mate? I am having exactly the same challenges as Paul. It won't allow me to share the sound or to optimize the video clip. Nightmare.
Wow. I actually think this is a Zoom issue today. I mean, I think a lot of our viewers had problems.
Oh, it's showing, John. We can see it.
Yeah. Can you hear that?
No, it might be yeah.
Yeah.
I do love those edits.
Should we play that on our LinkedIn channel?
Yeah, definitely.
Yes.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, in fact, I feel the need to, as chat box monitor, acknowledge to all those who have problems getting into Zoom today and watching this on YouTube instead. We will be like repeating the session so that people can see it. But I've put in the chat who we've got coming up. So, Johnny, conscious of your agenda and your timing, shall we invite our first guest?
Yes, I think that's a job for Mr. Clark to intro our first guest for today.
Great.
Thank you. And I know who it is. It's James, because Johnny always doesn't say who it is, just to try and see if I get caught up by forgetting the order. So I happen to know that it's James, and so I will continue to do his introduction. Thanks, Johnny. All right, James, thanks for coming on camera. James has worked in transport and decarbonisation policy in the UK's government DfT since 2017 as head of ZEV regulation. He leads the team responsible for delivering legally binding and road vehicle carbon reduction regulations. This has included designing, developing, and legislating for the ZEV mandate, as well as delivering and implementing CO2 legislation retained in the UK following the UK's withdrawal from the EU. His fun fact, at least in the context of designing the ZEV mandate, shush, Paul, is a bit of a stretch. He has an MA in international political economy from the University of Birmingham, where he focused on market-based decarbonisation mechanisms in the UK. James, that is the worst fun fact we've ever had. I'm sorry.
I don't dispute that, and I think I said that in the email back to you. Said it's a very dubious fun fact.
In this forum, mate, you're going to get ridiculed for things like that. So next time you come on, you've got to do better. Okay, so that is not.
I'll think of something.
It's a good fact, and it shows an infinite amount of knowledge in your brain, but it is not a fun fact. So next time, do better.
I'll do better next time.
Anyway, welcome, James. All the ridicule aside, thank you for being on our show today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, ZEV mandate. What's that all about?
In a nutshell, it's the world's most ambitious, legally binding decarbonisation framework. It's the regulation that we implemented or put before Parliament last year, which basically sets a minimum target for the percentage of zero-emission vehicle sales that each manufacturer will need to sell as of 2 weeks ago on an annual basis.
Excellent. Fantastic. And James, it's worth probably you kind of expounding a little bit around how this came about and then, where you think it's going. And we've had a little bit of a chat because, I think this has got more loopholes than my knitting. So, but,
I will get the defensive lines out then.
Absolutely. But it will be really interesting to see how you view that and how you think it's going to make that difference across the next few years as we move towards 2030.
While James answers that, Paul, would you just mind getting your knitting, please? Because I'd like to see this.
Yeah, I'd like crocheting at first.
Yeah, I can't match the knitting. Can't save my life. But if you want to do that, Paul, that's not a problem. Yeah, in terms of the ZEV mandate, so I think brief bit of context. We'll go back to about 2020. The UK at that point, we're still in the EU from a regulatory perspective, and all of our vehicles are being captured by EU regulation. Obviously, Brexit process happens, and all of that EU regulation gets copied into UK law. Now, by then, we had already committed to the 2035 phase out. We've still got carbon budgets and so on, and we've known for quite a while that there was quite a big gap between EU regulation that we copied and ambition. So basically, since day one, we've been looking at what we could do to close that gap. What kind of regulation can we put in place to save the amount of carbon that we need to save, as well as umpteen other things around the market, around charge points, and so on and so on. So yeah, over the course of 2.5 years, we held three consultations looking at the regulatory framework and how the regulation should be designed. So yeah, our first consultation was in 2021, basically setting out the gap between regulation and ambition and looking at two types of framework that we could use, one being CO2, the other being ZEV mandate. We can then confirmed a ZEV mandate approach, and then had a couple more consultations after that to inform policy design. And we've ended up with the regulation that we currently have. Now, obviously, it's only been in effect for all of 2 weeks. It probably hasn't had a massive impact in those 2 weeks, hopefully a little bit, don't get me wrong, but we're expecting to see, over the course of the data that we capture this year, I would see a massive upturn in the number of ZEVs that are being sold. On the target side for cars, it's 22% this year. On the commercial side, it's 10%. And those targets increase year on year, from those up to 70% and 80% for vans and cars in 2030. And obviously the plan is then to go to 100% in 2035. Now, with all of that in mind, if we're putting the regulation in place to get the ZEVs onto the road, there's an entire ecosystem as well, whether that's manufacturing, whether that's the charge point sector. So what we want to see is all of those different facets work in tandem to basically give us the best possible transition that we can.
Fantastic. What a great summary. John, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, James, I'm about to do something unforgivable, and that's potentially give you a banana skin.
Go for it.
Because this is a question that I know people are asking. We've got government legislation that places an onus on manufacturers to sell a certain number of electric vehicles per year, a percentage of their output per year. If they fail to do that, they will be fined. Or they will need to make a financial contribution towards the cost of failing to achieve that target. Put it how you will.
Okay.
On the other side of that, we've got supply and demand. And on the demand side, what we've done is the government have said, oh, well, we're going to take the foot off the accelerator in terms of 2030, which was the commitment that we had, pushing it back to 2035. You've got manufacturers who need to sell and customers who are not now required to buy quite so early. Does that make sense?
From a policy perspective, I would argue it does, and I'll give two reasons for it. The first is we need to look at the commitments that manufacturers have already put in place. If you kind of split each manufacturer up by their share of the UK market, we're already at 67% by 2030. Manufacturers representing 67% of vehicle sales have committed to being 100% ZEV by 2030 already. Obviously, that's 5 years ahead of the target we currently have. So we're expecting that to happen even without kind of without the ZEV mandate, without government intervention. That's commitments that have already been made. The second aspect that I would focus on is to do with the intention of the policy. We're in the business of trying to save as much carbon as possible, among many other things. We had that 2030 commitment when the evidence showed that plug-in hybrids were more efficient than petrol, than diesel, than mild hybrids. As we've got more data and gathered more evidence, that hasn't necessarily been shown to be the case. If you've got a plug-in hybrid that then doesn't get plugged in, actually what you've ended up with is a really heavy petrol or diesel vehicle that is then spewing more CO2 into the atmosphere. So when it comes to that 2030 commitment, going back to us trying to save as much carbon as possible, it doesn't really make any sense to be preventing the sale of one particular technology if that technology in itself isn't actually any worse than another technology that we would be allowing. So that's why we've kind of pushed the 2030 commitment back. It's just that it doesn't make any sense to be allowing hybrids and preventing ICE when there's not that much difference between the two.
I think it's a really fair point. I think a couple of things that stood out to me. Obviously, you're looking to collect a lot of data over the next 12 months and sort of see where that's going. And you referred to that sort of 67%, but that's not necessarily 70% of each manufacturer. Now, obviously, there's a number of, I called them loopholes, but let's call it trading ability capacity to avoid the fines and it's quite possible that can be levered for the next 3 or 4 years in particular. Talk to me about why that mechanism's there and what's hoped to achieve with that.
Yeah, of course. So I'll split this in two. We've got the trading element of the scheme, and then I'll touch on what I'll call the flexibilities, what probably referred to as loopholes, but I'll touch on that as well. So with the trading element, I think the first thing I would mention is under the Climate Change Act, which is the piece of primary legislation that we have made the ZEV mandate under, that requires there to be a trading element. You can't set a flat target. It's just not legally permissible. So the trading element is an intrinsic part of the scheme, and from an economic standpoint, it makes the most sense. If you are trying to change an industry, which is what the ZEV mandate is trying to do, you want that to happen in the most financially beneficial way, at the lowest cost to that particular industry. So depending on the manufacturer, it will cost different amounts to decarbonize at this point in time. And so it may well be that some manufacturers, it's actually cheaper for them to buy the allowances from other manufacturers that have been able to make the switch at a lower cost currently than it would cost them to put the EV on the road. So it is an intrinsic part of the regime. We had to do it, but it does also make sense from a policy perspective. On the flexibility side, obviously we have two flexibilities. We've got the borrowing mechanism, which allows you to effectively delay compliance if you can't hit a target this year, but you can catch up in the next 3 years, that's fine. And we also have the non-ZEV CO2 to ZEV transfer mechanism, which again is a time-limited 3-year window of opportunity, where if a manufacturer has reduced their carbon emissions according to the 2021 baseline, they can transfer some of that into ZEV compliance. And on both, I think we need to realize that in the grand scheme of things, we've brought the regulation in on relatively short notice. If we, again, using the EU regulations as a basis for comparison, there's usually somewhere in the region of 4 to 6 years notice for the targets kicking in. And we know that product cycles on the manufacturer side are about the same. So bringing the regulation in legally in 23 and it's starting in 2024, we know that manufacturers can't make the changes to their, their compliance mechanisms, their production facilities, whatever it may be, on that short notice. So, we would argue it's absolutely right that for a transitional period, some of those baked in decisions that they've already made on the CO2 front, they should be able to be transferred. And if a manufacturer is at the point currently where they can't hit the targets, but they know they can catch up in the time frame that they've got to actually respond to the regulation, then we should allow that as well.
James, that's brilliant. That's a really, really comprehensive answer. And I'm so glad that we managed to get you on, because I think you've explained it in a way that probably everybody can understand and actually kind of go along with. I can't really fight you too much. I think it's been pretty damn reasonable. Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you, James. I echo Paul's comments there. Fantastic that he would speak about this. But it's actually now time to hear from our next guest speaker. But you're not let off the hook just yet, James. You will have more questions from the team later, no doubt. So please do stay on. Over to you, Sam, to welcome our next guest. It's Matt, by the way.
Yes, I know that, obviously. All right, next intro then. Matt, your camera's on. Thank you. Welcome. So Matt Adams is the Transport and Policy Manager for the REA, leading their EV Forum Recharge, UK's EV policy. Matt is uniquely privileged in being able to cover any and every area of EV policy every day, covering anything from fleet electrification to the ZEV mandate, which is very broad, which is brilliant. Cross-pavement solutions. I'm curious to know what that means. All vehicle to grid. Oh, I see what that means. To name a few, and how these interact with the wider energy system. Interesting fact, which is better than James's. He currently holds a rowing record on the River Cam, which had until that time been unbroken for 30 years. So, Matt, it seems we have 2 record holders in the room today. So there's more than just one of us, which is nice. I don't think I've ever mentioned that, but it's another record holder. It's great to have you on the show. So welcome as always. It's nice to see you again, and welcome to the show.
Is it a rowing record or is it a rowing record? You said a row on the cam on the river.
Well, you know, I was a cock, so it was just shouting. At people.
Oh no, it's not true. He's a lovely bloke.
John, I think Sam and Paul hold that record of the rowing record.
Yeah, quite possibly.
Yeah. Paul says I win though. So anyway,
let's listen to somebody more important.
Yeah,
than
over to
That's
you,
a good
Matt.
idea.
Definitely, Matt.
Yeah, thanks. It was really interesting just hearing everything you guys are talking about, particularly some of those banana peels. I think I've got maybe a few more for you, James, unfortunately. But before we go into that, I just want to say how lucky we were to have James and his team working on the ZEV mandate, because they gave a lot of industry engagement, far more than you get for some other parts of the other consultations. And we were able to get James in several of our EV forum meetings, and he had many crisis calls with me one-on-one as well whenever I had a panic about something. So credit to James and the team for that. I think firstly, on the sort of positive note as well, it's worth bearing in mind that what's actually gone through is massive, and having those sales targets is going to provide a lot of certainty to everyone in the sector, which is great. Especially when we think last year we had the PM standing outside of number 10 saying basically anti-net zero everything. Was an interesting look. We had that kind of week between that speech and the ZEV mandate response coming out, where there were rumor mills spreading, where people were going, well, the sales target's going to be candled together and all of that. So I think that the fact we got it through at all was brilliant. But yeah, for the banana peels, James, I thought I think you've sort of touched on them there, and I just want to get a bit more detail if that's okay. So you got 2 of those flexibility mechanisms, which this year you got the over compliance mechanism, which changed from the consultation of 25% you could borrow or take to 65% in the response, which is quite a big leap. So I'd be interested to understand how that leap happened. But if you combine that over compliance mechanism, which is essentially if you've produced a vehicle with less CO2 than you did in 2021, you would be allowed to trade in credits. Now, I think most manufacturers have an efficiency improvement of 1 or 2% a year, so we would expect almost every manufacturer to be able to hit that at the moment. I don't know if they'd be able to maximize it, but they'd certainly be able to use it, right? So that combined with the borrowing mechanism, in theory, if they did both, and that's only a theory, it probably won't happen, but in theory, they could produce 40% less vehicles than they did last year, I believe. So just wanted to understand, is that a concern, particularly when we think, how much stability, how much assurance will that give to the market?
Yes, it's probably where I jump in. I'll trust your maths. I can't do the maths that quickly off the top of my head. I think, first of all, it's worth remembering that this is both of them, the kind of the non-ZEV to ZEV and the borrowing mechanism. They're both time limited. They're both only for 3 years. And again, it's just to really reflect the fact that we know that this has been brought in on less than a product cycle's worth of development. So we still think it's right to provide manufacturers with that flexibility, to give them some reward for the carbon reduction technologies that they either have put in place or will be put in place in the very short term. Now, you're absolutely right. If a manufacturer chooses to maximize both, yes, theoretically, then they can get through 2024 without selling a ZEV, possibly. But again, going back to the policy intention and thinking about the fact that it's short term, if you're reducing your CO2 compared to 2021, yes, it doesn't hit every policy goal that we want the ZEV mandate to hit, but it is reducing carbon. And on the borrowing mechanism, yes, it means that manufacturers can delay compliance, if I can put it that way, but they still have to sell those vehicles eventually. And anything they do borrow is still subject to an interest rate as well. So even if the vehicles aren't being sold in 2024, they will be sold by 2027. And there will be more of them being sold to make up for the fact that they weren't sold originally.
Yeah, just on that then, second prong,
Yeah.
very briefly, just I know in 2027 we got the review coming in. Yeah, with that review, I think you'll also be making a decision on the sales targets of 31 to 35. Are you worried?
Subject to, obviously,
Yeah.
whoever the future administration is,
Yeah.
subject to decisions of ministers. Yeah.
Yeah, are you worried that the data from 24 to 26, because it will be a bit skewed with the flexibility mechanisms, that it won't represent a true understanding of where manufacturers could be at in 2027?
Honestly, I would say that I'm not too concerned, and the reason for that is when we get into 2027, when we get to that review point, yes, we won't have had, if I say the first year without flexibilities, but we will know what that gap looks like. And as part of our analysis of everything that we've put in place, you always assume full compliance. So we'll know how much has been borrowed, we'll know what the transfers have been like over the past 3 years, and we'll know what that gap is between achievement in years 1, 2, and 3 versus what the targets are in 2024 and what that catch-up will need to be. And realistically, if a manufacturer does catch up by 2027, they will be above the 27 target, and I can't see a world where they hit the 27 target and then sell fewer ZEVs in 28. Once the transition's been made, the transition's been made.
Oh, well, that's all my prongs.
All your bananas, Jens. Very good.
Good prongs.
Thank you very much, Matt, and especially for throwing the banana peels. We can throw more later. However, it is that time again where we do need to push on and welcome our next and final guest speaker. You might know her from the EV Cafe. Sam, over to you. And if you need to read this intro, there's clearly something wrong.
No, that's okay. I'm worried about what's going to happen, but you go ahead and read it.
Okay, thank you, Johnny. Yeah. So last time I introduced Sarah, I did it ad lib, and that was a mistake because I just ended up sounding like an absolute idiot. So this time I put a little bit more effort in, but also cognizant of the fact that Sarah is one of the EV Cafe, but also representing one of our major sponsors. So for at least a little bit, I've got to be professional. At least start that way, right? Anyway, so Sarah Sloman is in fact the Chief Strategy Officer at Paythrough, who specialize in EV charging and payment systems. I'm very good at it. They are too. She has extensive experience in delivering sustainable transport projects in both the private and public sectors over the last 2 decades. She hosts the EV Rally alongside our beloved John Curtis. Beloved? Back off, Curtis. But most of all, she is what is that? Better known for ESG. Sorry, I got my words mixed up when I threatened to back off then. ESG, of course, being environmental social governance. So she's better known for ESG, diversity and inclusion, and driving forward the ethical, sustainable growth. This career of hers, which is extensive, earned her the Barbara Cox Woman of the Year Award in 2023. How many times do we have to hear about people's accolades on this show?
I know, right?
Honestly.
I know.
I mean, you don't hear me waxing lyrical about my Guinness World Record, do you?
Of course not.
Never. Anyway, it's her words, so, we'll carry on. Now, this bit's fun. This is where it gets a bit more interesting. What we might not know, she's written, we might not know, which means some people might know this. She represented the UK in the global competition to find a climate champion, coming second and narrowly missing a chance to study the ice cores in the Arctic. Now, if anybody actually might have known that, please do let me know. Turns out she was delighted about this because she is in fact scared of polar bears. And that's brilliant, Sarah, that you're scared of polar bears. I'm pretty sure that if any of us came across a polar bear, we'd be scared too.
Pretty scared, yeah.
Yeah. She also wanted to add in a joke, which was an alternative fact to the polar bear, that koala bears are in fact not bears because they did not pass. They did not pass the koalifications.
Okay, I need you all to know.
Anyway,
I
Sarah,
didn't
don't
write
interrupt.
that
Please don't
joke.
interrupt, Sarah. Please don't interrupt. Thank you very much. Anyway, Sarah has another ambition. She was to ride her electric motorbike across Europe, which is what prompted her to get her moped at secondary school, but didn't get a chance to pass her full license until 2022. So motorbike license tick, travel across Europe not ticked, not yet, but I'm sure that will be on the way. Anyway, that's enough from me, Sarah. It's a delight and a privilege to present you on our show. And I don't say welcome because you're already part of the furniture. So over to you.
Well, thank you. I didn't write that koala joke. I did not write that koala joke. Just really wanted to get that on record. But no, thank you. This is rather nice. Thank you, all of you EV Cafe crew, for continuing to, well, amplify the importance of having what I call a solid ESG strategy. And I can't stress enough that this isn't just for that feel-good factor, which it does bring, by the way, but it's about being tangible, measurable, having impact that you can point at and say, we did this. And that's what we're all about on the EV Cafe, not just talking about stuff, but doing it and then encouraging other people to do it too. And I've been really looking forward to this today. So thank you. Now, we know that soon enough we are, well, not soon enough, perhaps, internal combustion engine production will cease. And we know as well that an ethical supply chain is starting to have tangible weightings on tendering processes. So this is where you are favored if you are a business who can prove that you are adopting externally monitored progress to make sure that you're doing what you say you're going to do. Now, where pay-through is concerned, I remain extremely proud of our commitment to this because it's an unapologetic priority. And it's not just us. EV drivers and charge point operators, they're all becoming much more conscious of the source of their electricity, the materials used in the chargers that people are buying, and also what businesses can do to support the growing EV community. But I guess it's time, we should go back to the beginning. There was CSR before. CSR was corporate and social responsibility. And I believe ESG is pretty much CSR, but on heat. And I'm very grateful for that because CSR was good, but it didn't seem to have any particular consequence. It felt very optional. And ESG actually stands for environmental, social governance, and the G is key there. So it essentially forms a framework for evaluating a company's performance under those three key headers. Now, I sometimes add in a fourth one, profitability. This isn't about doing something to be rolling around in profit or gain PR benefits from it, but it's about proving, as another P, proving that these measures aren't intended as any kind of hindrance or blocker. They're actually there to make your business more scalable, more profitable. And after listening to the EV Cafe podcast, where John and Paul asked the gentleman from EV Age what he felt was important in this industry, he said there was three key priorities. And as a fleet manager, oh, by the way, EV Age are EHGV manufacturer, so this is really important to them. But he said three things. One, as a fleet manager, profit is a priority to make money, because only then can your business even begin to strive for what matters second and third, which is people and the environment. And that's not in terms of order of importance, that's order in which things have to happen. So I often say that change comes from one person, it stems from motivation, but after that has to come innovation and has to come monetization, because ESG really is an investment. And I'm leading this at Paythrough, number one, because it means a lot to me to work somewhere that's actually building infrastructure and software consciously, but also because I make very openly loud commitments to sustainability and ESG. So it really means something to me. I'm really pleased that Paythrough are fully committed to this. We signed up in 2022. We chose to partner with Eden 7. They are ESG specialists who make sure that we are accounting for our impact independently. And now we expect this of our clients and our partners too. By the way, Simon King of Eden 7 sent me some pegs for Christmas, and these pegs wasn't the best gift I got, but they're very nice, and they were made from recycled fishing nets. So they had a point. They had a point to make, and so do I. The IPCC, which is the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change, states that we require a 43% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2030 globally. But globally, according to Reuters, we're on track for just 2%. So needless to say, we have a very long way to go, but there is so much we can do. In our industry, we have seen charge point operators under pressure to make these ESG commitments, whether that's signing up to renewable energy supply or implementing sustainable manufacturing and operational practices, or whether it's just simply embracing diversity and inclusion. Something about giving back and paying forward is what we're all about, and that's what everybody's looking for, going beyond greenwashing. I do fear those very kind efforts of tree planting of old are dying a death, and that can only be seen with evidence. So some facts, some fleet-based facts: only a fifth of fleets have made a formal commitment to decarbonisation, and this is part of their KPIs, their key performance. But 81% of delivery fleets are yet to even begin their transition to EVs, and they cite availability of vehicles as a major blocker for that. But they do intend to in the next 3 to 5 years, just in time. Now, according to McKinsey, who, by the way, McKinsey is the oldest and largest of what I would call the big three management consultancies, and they lead on things like global economic reporting, they consider ESG initiatives to be important to decision makers, and that decision makers are willing to pay a premium for businesses that can prove to deliver on ESG, because it's the buyers who are voting with their feet, and that's when the cash flow starts to speak volumes. I'm really conscious I'm burning through my time here. Stop burning stuff and all that. But lastly, I just wanted to do a quick reminder, looking at the time, yes, quick reminder of the things that we can do in our own lives and our own businesses to lead by example and adopt these sustainable practices. And it's the boring stuff, the stuff that's been around forever, that we've known, the obvious, reducing waste, living responsibly and so on. And we really get that, we really do. But at work, this is so important. At work, if you can get support from anyone who shares your ethos, who has power internally, you can suggest things like policies that prioritize the environment. Maybe that could be partnering strategies or growth plans, but right through to procurement, making sure you're working with the right people in your company and getting the right products. But one that I really like is supporting HR. Support HR in strengthening your personal lives in the teams that you work within, and paying that forward out to communities and charities as well. It's all under the banner of ESG. Maybe it's marketing. Through marketing, we can promote responsible journalism, dispelling those myths as we do so well on the EV Cafe News, fake news, and getting rid of those pointless time-wasting stories that mean we hinder our own progress. So it's about effective change, being able to measure something and prove something, and hopefully profit from doing the right thing. And I'm going to say, I felt this was really daunting at first. I truly did. I stuck my own head above the parapet. I've not had it blasted off just yet, because it makes sense. It makes business sense, strategic sense, and now I've got to execute a whole action plan at Paythrough around that. But this is about continuing my own personal impact as well, so my personal pledge. And you might have heard John and Paul in particular celebrating that the EV Cafe, we're going to launch an ESG accelerator workshop, which is about helping your business get started on ESG delivery and finding the right partner to make sure that you're in the right place when you're expanding. But we will, of course, be continuing our charity work. We celebrated last month the 10 charities that we supported in 2023. And I'll be asking all of our partners and sponsors to join in with all of that. And if I may, I really want to just say a huge thank you to one of our sponsors. Very special shout out to Stuart Middleton of Interval Recruitment. He's been supporting me behind the scenes in launching the Barbara Cox Woman of the Year bursary. Now, part of the prize, and I jokingly held up the trophy there, but part of the prize was in fact a prize fund, which I pledged to pay forward. So we're on the lookout for a candidate who will benefit from that money. Maybe there's a course that they couldn't get on. Maybe they didn't want to tell their employer about a blocker that they felt. But I'm trying to encourage people to either come over to our industry or improve their position within our industry in the interest of longevity. So massive thanks to all of the EV Cafe crew and our sponsors who's going to help launch that campaign right after the show. So I will get off my soapbox now, but it's with huge thanks and huge love that you would let me talk about that for 5-10 minutes.
Thanks, Sarah.
Can I
Go on, you got your hand
jump
up.
in? Yeah. I just wanted people to know how good Sarah really is. She just spoke for 10 minutes.
10, sorry.
An awful lot of information. And I guarantee you she has no notes. It's all in her head. It's quite remarkable the level of skill that you have in this area. And please don't underestimate just how good a speaker Sarah is, because that comes straight from her heart and out of her head, whereas the rest of us, we're all scrabbling around with post-it notes, putting up information around our screens. Not Sarah.
Oh, thank you guys. Well, that's a really good point. It comes from the heart. And on my socials, please do follow my socials. I did actually post something today, which I shared with you personally, John, around if you do something you love, you're never going to work a day in your life. And someone scribbled it out and went, if you do something you love, you're going to end up working relentlessly with no boundaries and taking everything personally. And I think that's where change comes from. Like I said before, it comes from somebody with a motivation who then goes to innovation, who then goes to monetization, and then it happens. It just takes someone to push something through and have the support to do so, and that's what we're all about on the EV Cafe.
Amazing.
I particularly like the burning through time comment, Sarah. I think that's really,
Sorry.
really. No. I mean, if you think about it, it's quite poignant, isn't it? I mean, we are burning through our time. You know, the IPCC have made that abundantly clear, and so we need to do something about that. So, in many ways, it's quite poignant, really, as a phrase. I don't know if anyone's tapped into that anywhere, but burning through time is great.
Yeah, stop burning stuff, including time.
Yeah, I also like the profitability element that you add to the ESG concept too. Although I typically try to sort of phrase it as commercial viability in my head, because it's not always possible for new business to be profitable straight away. But at the same time, it has to be a commercially viable product. Otherwise you're just, it's not, we're not going to achieve anything. So I always caveat that when I sometimes challenge new styles of business emerging is does it have a commercial viability and therefore a profitability at the end of that roadmap? Because if not, then stop and go and do something else that's going to be able to make a long-term difference.
John, we have 15 minutes and some rather large questions.
Oh, yes.
From James and Matt. Do you want to open up the mailroom for a moment?
Yeah, please, mate, if I may. But before I do, in the chat box, Kate Tyrrell, sorry I'm late. Where have you been? Bring a note next time. Ben McDonald said, well said, Sarah. Michael Barton, very well said, Sarah. Teresa Swift from Formula Space, great detail and information. Thanks, Sarah. And Liz Allen, my favourite comment. Sarah is someone I could listen to for ages, as she's so knowledgeable and actually gives a crap about everything she gets involved with. Brilliant.
Oh, thank you, everyone. I needed that boost. I really appreciate it. Yeah, and as I say, this is what we're here for, so use us.
Anyway, right, let's move on. The mail room. So these are listeners, viewers' questions for our panelists. And James, I might have you on standby, my friend, because I think you've got one or two. And the first one's really interesting. It's from Alex Hansford. And Alex says, what are the government doing to mitigate the misinformation we see with the EV transition? And before you say a word, can I just say, I don't think it's just government's problem. I think this is something that we can all tackle and do. But James, specifically from a government perspective, how do we make sure that we speak about facts?
Yeah, so obviously I need to start my sentence by saying this isn't an area as a civil servant that I cover. So I can provide more information in writing afterwards and whatever it may be. Obviously, we have an entire office of zero emission vehicles. They handle every other aspect of the zero emission vehicle transition, if you like. You know, I technically not in OZEV, I do the regulation, but OZEV does everything else. They have a huge amount of work going on to tackle all of the misinformation, all of the wariness around the transition, if I can put that. So, you know, even something as simple as there aren't enough charge points. You know, some people may well think that. Maybe that's a visibility thing. Maybe that really is a statistics thing. But if you can get that into the public domain that we've got over 50,000 public charges, all of a sudden that becomes a very different message.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. This is a shared obligation on all of us who care, and to use Liz Allen's words, give a crap. There's a brilliant question from Luca Pappalardo. Luca's from Paythrough, bless his little heart. And it's a question, James, which follows on from what I was asking about this dichotomy between supply and demand. He says, what do you think is going to increase the demand for EVs from consumers?
Good question. I suppose in one answer, because obviously there are various things I could say. The one that for me is that if people try an EV or a zero emission vehicle, putting aside the fact it's a different change of technology, whatever it may be, generally performance wise, they are much better than an ICE vehicle. I remember test driving one the first time 6.5 years ago or so. It was a tiny little EV hatchback. And yet that was absolutely rapid. I remember we took it, I think it was Brands Hatch who went on the test track around the circuit. And just something as simple as what looks like a very standard run-of-the-mill A to B vehicle is actually really fun to drive. And I think that's going to be part of the challenge. You know, some people have ICE vehicles and they're used to driving them and they really enjoy the feel, the sound, whatever it may be. Yes, there are changes, but give it a go and you'll realize actually it's the same type of vehicle, but probably more fun to drive.
Yeah, isn't that why government have put a lot of money behind some experiential kind of demo programs in Kent, in Leeds, in a number of, to get bums on seats? We've been saying this for some time, and you know, one of the shows or a number of the shows now that we're going to be going to at Everything Electric are particularly focused on really delivering that bums on seats experience, you know, kind of getting people to test drive vehicles, and of course both from a personal car perspective, but also a commercial vehicle. It's night and day difference. So I agree with you, James.
May I ask a question to James? Can I squeeze in and do one?
Go on then.
Oh, he got the look. He got the look.
James, you mentioned 50,000 chargers, and one thing that a lot of us in the industry all claim the statement of is right chargers, right place, right time. And it's not really appropriate to compare a lamppost charger blocked by a petrol car that never gets used with a 350 kilowatt charger that's utilized all day long on a motorway service area, right? So is it not the time now to start to put some delineations into those numbers so that people are being given the right number, as opposed to a big number, which sounds great, but actually a large proportion of those are, or even if no matter what they are, I suppose the fact is they do very different things for different people with short dwell times, long dwell times. So do we need to think about how we structure that? Because one big number, I think, is misleading.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to be fair to OZEV, they do split the facts out. So, I say 50,000 because that's the biggest number. But at the same time, I've read about 10,000 rapid charges, 50 kilowatt plus. You're absolutely right. Different chargers are used for different things. You say a 350 kilowatt charger at a service station is for you're going on a long journey and you need a top up. A lamppost charger is, you might not have access to a driveway, but you've got a lamppost outside your home and you can just plug it in, leave it overnight. You wake up in the morning and job done. So yeah, they do different things. OZEV do split the statistics out to break it down by kilowatt and so on. Yeah, that's my answer there.
All right,
Matt.
Yeah, if I may, sorry,
Please.
if I may, I mean, I think, also in terms of like accessing an EV, I think the second-hand market and that growth is going to be hugely significant and getting more people in, whether that's vans or cars. So thought I should stick in vans for Paul. Just
Absolutely,
it's not been said in a while. So yeah, second market hugely important. Obviously, I know there's a scrapper scheme in London, and there's one in Glasgow as well. Having some more financial support to help people on lower incomes access those EVs on the second-hand market could also be really important as we roll out across the country. But wait and see what OZEV have in store for us on that one.
very good point to bring in the used side of things, and I'll just defer to the other two hands that went, James and Sarah.
Oh, James, did you have a hand as well? I'm sorry, I didn't see that.
It was very quick. I was just going to say on the second-hand point. So that was something we're very cognizant of with the design of the mandate. And that's why in terms of how we define a ZEV, we've got kind of the three criteria. The first is the obvious one that it's 0 grams. But the other two is that the vehicle must have a minimum range of 100 miles. And the third is that we have minimum warranty requirements, which stipulate that if you drop beneath a certain percentage of battery capacity within 8 years, that the warranty should cover a battery replacement. And that's all designed so that when these vehicles do hit the second-hand market, anywhere between 6 months, 3 years, whatever it may be, actually that vehicle is still a very viable vehicle. It still has a very, very usable range. So it's one of the multiple objectives that we're trying to hit with the mandate.
Just a quick comment on the used bit, if I may, Sarah. Sorry. I don't know if anybody knows, but I just bought a van in order to sell it, right? So this is to support the small businesses and used market. But I did the calculation on, this has got no miles at all. I mean, it hasn't been used, literally. It's a year old. And it's going to save the next purchaser £1,500 a year on average, because it's cheaper than its equivalent diesel. And of course, you've got all the fuel savings. That's without even including maintenance. So not only is it going to be a great driving experience, but actually a financial experience. So if we can drive vehicles in at the top, the quicker we can get them out to the next user, I think it's a really important point. Sarah, I'm sorry, I just had to make that point.
Well, no, I'm glad you did. And I did see that on your socials. Congratulations. And I had a question for Matt, but I'm going to flip it because I've just spotted the time and Johnny did quite rightly say there's still some official questions. I've just posted on the LinkedIn wall the link to the Renewable Energy Association. That's what the REA stands for. And you have a report called Charging Forward to 2030. And this is about how to solve the policy and regulatory barriers to charge point deployment and end the unequal geographic distribution of that charging infrastructure. So everything we could possibly know is in there. And if we've got, you're on mute, Matt. If we've got time after the rapid fire Q&A, perhaps you can give us your personal take on why that's a relevant report for us. And I'll make sure there's a link in the LinkedIn as well.
Yeah, thanks for the plug.
Come back to you a bit later. All right then, John, hit us. What have we got? 4 more official Q&As.
Yeah, I'm going to go to the one from Randall Tiny Smith, just on the basis that he's about 3 inches taller than I am and will punch my lights out if I don't. And he develops this thing that I was talking about the reason why people would, it would be really helpful if whoever just deleted that question didn't move it so I can read the darn thing. Anyway, with the move of the ban out to 2035 and the potential for future customers to delay their decisions to step into the EV arena, is there any leeway in the ZEV mandate targets if the OEMs can't sell due to a lack of demand?
I would say for that reason, not really. We do have flexibility within the regulation so that if something genuinely unforeseen happens, that we won't just be fining everyone. Sorry, requiring payments of everyone. It's not a fine. See, do it myself. So yeah, if something, I'll use COVID. If something like COVID happens again, then we do have some flexibility. If it's down to simply a case of supply and demand, I would argue that that doesn't meet the threshold. Ultimately, the manufacturers do need to sell the vehicles. Yes, there is a role for government to put in place the right demand side requirements, but I would say that I would say it's a very high bar to meet the flexibility threshold on that front.
Okay, thank you. Matt, there's a question from Michael Barton, and he says that in his view, and I think he's right, people misunderstand the original 2030 and 2035 ban in that they think petrol and diesel cars will be banned from the face of the planet from there on in. And it's not quite that, is it? Can you explain what it is?
Yeah, sure. So it's 2030 is the ban on the sale of new petrol. 2035 is now the ban on the sale of new petrol and diesel cars, but you can still buy it in the second-hand market for as long as the car lasts. So no one's going to suddenly take away your petrol car on as soon as New Year's Eve 2030 happens. But for new cars, they'll all be electric or hydrogen, possibly, although probably a very small number. But hopefully not. Hopefully be all electric. But yeah, for the most part, it's new cars only, and that's included in that.
That's helpful. Thank you. Have we got time for one more, JB?
We
did.
Right, Alan Acaster. Why couldn't we have kept the 2030 deadline but remove the hybrid exception rather than push the whole deadline back 5 years? How many vehicle manufacturers were included in those discussions that led to the change? Oof.
Or how many
question.
influenced the change, perhaps?
Yeah.
Well, I think I'm not going to talk about the conversations that happened with manufacturers or anything like that. I think as part of the ZEV mandate, we've obviously spoken with every manufacturer at length because we want the regulation to work. What I would say is on the 2030, 2035 aspect, the end of sale of non-zero emission has always been 2035. If you go back even further, it goes to 2040. So, the very first date was 2040. It was brought forward to 2035. And as I say, the evidence at the time in 2020, I think it was, suggested that yes, you could move to some form of hybrid by 2030, and that would end up saving carbon. That, the evidence shows now, is not the case. And so either you remove that date, which is what we've happened, or actually you end up having to bring the date forward by another 5 years. It doesn't make a lot of sense in that respect, because you're then talking about a very short time frame to go from where we're at to actually now you can only sell zero emission vehicles. There still needs to be some form of transition over the next few years to make sure that we can actually do it in a sustainable manner. So I understand where the question's coming from, but in terms of the date, it's always been 2035.
James, can I just say it's an absolute joy to have somebody associated with the government, and from a civil servant's perspective, I understand that, but to come along and take these questions head on and give some balanced, reasoned argument. I got to say, that's magnificent. One question, Ash Bannister just said, can we ban the term self-charging hybrids? Amen to that. I think it's back to you, JB.
Yeah, so I echo all your comments there, John. It's been a great session. I've learned a lot as well. But I am afraid to say that it is all that we have time for today. So again, a massive thank you to Matt, Sarah, and James, and all those that participated on today's session. Some great questions. And I just want to say, please make sure you register for next month's session, which falls on Valentine's Day. Don't forget to follow on our social media channels for updates. And remember, every Friday morning, catch up with the latest news hosted by the amazing John Curtis. And last, I just want to say thank you for joining us.
Who won the mug? Who won the mug? Who won the mug? What was the best
Over
question?
to you, JC. That's your
I
decision.
think it's got to be, can we ban Ash Bannister? Can we ban self-charging hybrids? It's
I
a
mean, it was
brilliant
funny,
question.
yeah.
I think we should do that without
Okay.
question. Have them by all means. They are not self-charging. Utter nonsense. Get that terminology out of our vocabulary.
How can you ban something that doesn't exist?
Unicorns?
Existential question. Love it.
Yeah, we'll move that to another session. Thank you, Sam, for your input today. You've been fabulous. Goodbye.
Thank you all.
Bye, everyone.
Goodbye.
Bye,
See you,
bye,
everybody.
bye.